As the evening light fades and the house grows quiet, I often pause by the window, thinking back on all the nights I simply went to bed when tiredness finally won. In our 50s, 60s, and 70s, those restless hours can leave us wondering why the next day feels a little heavier than it should. Yet what if doctors have quietly uncovered one gentle timing that aligns with how our bodies want to rest? A simple window that supports the health and steady years we've worked so hard to enjoy. That question stayed with me, inviting a deeper look at the close of each day. It happened during a routine checkup in the spring of my 62nd year, the kind of appointment I used to schedule without much thought. The waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and old magazines, and I sat flipping pages I wasn't really reading, already picturing the drive home through familiar streets lined with blooming dogwoods. When the nurse called my name, I followed her down the hallway feeling the usual mix of mild curiosity and quiet acceptance that comes with these visits now. My doctor, a kind man in his late 50s who had taken over my care a decade earlier, greeted me with his steady handshake and the same unhurried smile. We talked first about the ordinary things: blood pressure holding steady, cholesterol numbers looking better than expected, the mild stiffness in my knees that showed up most mornings. Then, almost as an afterthought, I mentioned how some days the fog lingered longer than it used to, even after what I considered a full night's sleep. I described waking at 6, feeling as though I'd only just closed my eyes, the small tasks of the day already feeling heavier than they once did. He listened without interrupting, nodding slowly the way he always did when something mattered. After a pause, he asked about my evenings, when I usually turned off the television, when the house went dark, when I actually climbed into bed. I answered honestly, most nights sometime after 11, often closer to midnight, the hours slipping away while I read or scrolled through photos of grandchildren or answered one last email. He didn't scold or lecture. Instead, he leaned forward slightly and said the next words with the calm certainty of someone who had seen this pattern play out in hundreds of lives much like mine. That single conversation, held in the soft light of an exam room on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, became the quiet turning point. It arrived at exactly the right moment, when retirement had settled into a comfortable routine of family gatherings, neighborhood walks, volunteer hours at the library, and the deepening wish to protect the health that let me keep savoring those things. His gentle observation felt less like medical advice and more like a respectful reminder from someone who understood how precious these later decades can be. He didn't rush into explanations or pull out charts. Instead, he spoke plainly, the way someone shares something valuable they've come to trust over many years of practice. For people in their 60s and beyond, he said, the research that holds up best points to one fairly consistent window. Falling asleep between 10 and 0 p.m., ideally closer to 10, seems to give the body the strongest alignment with its natural repair cycles. He explained it wasn't about forcing an early bedtime or chasing some rigid rule. It had more to do with how our circadian rhythm shifts as we age. The internal clock tends to move earlier, even if habits haven't caught up. Going to bed in that 10 to 11 range lets deeper sleep stages arrive when the body is most ready for them. Growth hormone release, memory consolidation, immune regulation, cardiovascular recovery, all those quiet nighttime processes appear to work more efficiently when sleep begins rather than after midnight. He mentioned large observational studies following thousands of older adults over many years. The patterns were clear. Consistent bedtimes in that earlier window correlated with lower risks of cognitive decline, better blood pressure control, steadier mood, and, in some analyses, modestly longer healthy lifespans. Nothing dramatic or guaranteed, just a gentle statistical edge that accumulated night after night. What struck me most was how undramatic he made it sound. No magic hour, no promise of miracle cures. Just a small, respectful adjustment to the end of the day that honored the way an older body wants to rest. It's one of the few things we can influence without pills or major upheaval, he added. A quiet way to support the health you already have. Those few minutes of conversation reframed bedtime for me. It stopped being the moment exhaustion finally won and became a deliberate, caring choice. One more way to tend to the life I still wanted to live fully. I started the change slowly, without fanfare. The first few nights I set a gentle alarm for 9:30 to remind myself to begin winding down. No dramatic overhaul, just dimming lights, closing the laptop earlier, letting the last cup of tea cool on the counter instead of carrying it to bed. By 10 o'clock I was usually under the covers, the house quiet except for the soft tick of the hallway clock. At first the shift felt strange, almost like leaving a conversation unfinished. My mind wanted to stay up, chasing one more article or replaying the day. Yet I kept to the window my doctor described, trusting the reasoning behind it. Within 10 days the difference appeared quietly. Mornings no longer arrived with that heavy veil across my thoughts. I woke at my usual 6, but the fog had lifted. Colors seemed a little sharper, the first walk around the block less effortful. Energy arrived steadier, not boundless youth, but a calm reliability that let me linger longer over coffee with my wife or play an extra set of cards with the grandchildren without feeling drained by noon. The real gift showed itself in smaller ways. I noticed I listened more fully during conversations, remembered names and details without strain, moved through the day with fewer of those frustrating pauses where words or plans slipped away. The stiffness in my knees eased a touch earlier in the morning, and my mood held even when little frustrations arose. Nothing miraculous, yet the accumulation felt meaningful, like tending a garden and watching it respond with steadier growth. Looking back, that modest adjustment reminded me how much influence still remains in these years. We can't stop time, but we can choose rhythms that honor the body we've carried this far. I suspect you felt something similar, perhaps after changing one small habit and discovering the quiet return it brings. A sense of being met halfway by life itself, as though the years ahead are willing to meet us with a bit more grace when we meet them with care. One evening several months into the new routine, an old habit nearly pulled me back. A favorite documentary series had just released its final episodes, and the temptation to watch just one more stretched past 9:30. The living room lamp glowed invitingly, the remote within easy reach, and part of me reasoned that missing the window once wouldn't matter. Yet as the clock edged toward 10, I remembered my doctor's quiet explanation, the way later nights could nudge the body's repair processes out of sync, quietly accumulating small disadvantages over time. I pressed pause, switched off the screen, and moved through the familiar steps, brushing teeth, setting out tomorrow's clothes, turning down the thermostat to that comfortable 68 degrees. The consistency itself became its own gentle reward. No dramatic transformation arrived overnight, but the pattern held. Weekends no longer meant staying up until midnight scrolling family photos or catching up on emails. Instead, evenings wound down predictably. I began noticing how the house settled earlier, the refrigerator's hum softer, neighborhood sounds fading sooner, and how that peace carried into deeper rest. Studies my doctor had referenced echoed in those quiet moments. Large groups tracked over years showed steadier outcomes for those who aligned bedtime with the body's shifting rhythm, particularly the natural advance that makes earlier sleep feel more intuitive as we age. Occasionally a social evening ran long, a dinner with friends or a grandchild's school play, but I returned home mindful, easing into bed without forcing it. The rhythm adapted, resilient yet forgiving. Over time, that small discipline wove itself into the fabric of ordinary days, offering a sense of quiet stewardship over the health still within reach. It wasn't perfection, just persistence in a choice that respected how the body, after so many decades, still responds gratefully to thoughtful care. That gentle bedtime has become the quiet anchor of my evenings now. When the sky outside deepens to indigo and the house begins its familiar settling sounds, the faint creak of floorboards cooling, the refrigerator cycling down, I no longer fight the pull toward rest. Around 9:30 the lights dim gradually, the television screen goes dark, the last pages of whatever book I'm reading close without regret. By 10 I'm in bed, the pillow cool against my cheek, the day's concerns already loosening their hold. There is something deeply satisfying in this small, repeated choice. It feels like an act of quiet respect, for the body that has carried me through decades of work and worry, for the mind that still wants to remember faces and stories clearly, for the years ahead that I hope will hold more mornings filled with light rather than haze. The rhythm is forgiving. A late night with friends or family doesn't unravel everything. I simply return to the pattern the next evening, and the body responds with the same steady gratitude. Over time I've come to see bedtime not as the end of something, but as the beginning of renewal. Each night spent in that earlier window is a small investment in the steadiness I want to keep. Clearer thoughts during conversations with old friends, easier steps on the garden path, the patience to listen fully when a grandchild tells a long, winding story. It is one of the few things entirely within my control, a way to meet the passing years with intention rather than resignation. In these later seasons, when so much feels like it moves beyond our grasp, this modest habit offers a gentle reminder: we can still shape the days that remain. Not through grand gestures, but through the steady accumulation of thoughtful choices made in the soft light of evening. The clock reaches 10, the room grows still, and sleep arrives like an old friend who knows exactly when to come. If this story touched something in your own quiet evenings, I'd be grateful if you liked the video and subscribe to Prime Wellness for more reflections like this. Tonight, before you turn in, ask yourself, what time feels right for the rest your body deserves?